The year is 1806 in Ceylon, and a young girl sits under the moonlight at the entrance to a modest thatch roof shack by the ocean. The waves crash louder and louder, but it does not drown out the piercing music of a group of striking women who sit with her. The young woman is Lovinia Aponsua, and she listens entranced as they invoke a haunting chant that is only sung in secret when the men of the house are sound asleep.
Udu mahalin pahapan ratnavaliye. Salu paladinde pahapan ratnavaliye. Mutu paladinde pahapan ratnavaliye. Rodiyas denne pahapan ratnavaliye.
The song is about a young noblewoman banished from the royal kingdom and who is about to be married off to a local huntsman as punishment. It reveals the past nobility of the women of Lovinia's family and their connections to royalty. This is the tale of Lovinia and Thomas, one of the greatest forbidden love stories of Ceylon. An unusual man arrives in Ceylon on the 17th of July 1805. His name is Thomas Maitland, and he has been put in charge of a country in flux. His predecessor, Governor Frederick North, has lost control of the situation on the island. Three major policy pushes from upstairs have exhausted North. First, the island was separated from the East India Company and placed under the Crown. Second, the British Empire had recently changed their strategy for the use of Ceylon. It was first occupied to ensure the security and control of India, but instead of a military stronghold, the island is now ordered to be a source of paddy production. The policies pursued at the time are intended to free the peasantry and encourage them to produce paddy through taxation and land reform. Finally, Britain is still not fully in control. They need to acquire the Kingdom of Kandy and consolidate their rule, and they are spending resources to fight nasty battles in the middle of the country with no end in sight. All this has caused chaos. Native headmen who already had status and power under the Dutch have gained more control over local affairs, and tax collectors are running rampant. Attempts to make Ceylon productive and profitable are failing. Humiliating defeats at the hands of Kandyan chieftains have demoralized the troops, and civil administration is crumbling. It is into this chaos that a 45-year-old Maitland enters the scene. He is already a civil service legend. Not only is he a military officer with extensive experience in India, he has also served in the British Parliament and was on the board of the British East India Company. Known as King Tom for his imperious manner and the vigour with which he asserts himself, he first spends 3 months touring the land to put his administrative priorities in order. But back to the day in July that he arrives in Ceylon. Inspecting the governor's residence only to find it in an advanced state of disrepair, he complains to the colonial secretary that he is exceedingly uncomfortable and looks on with disdain at the dishevelled guards who escort him around town. He has his work cut out for him. As was customary, an extensive welcome banquet is held in his honor, and there would be a performance by a local dance troupe after dinner. Wine warms the blood of the British officers as the dancers file into the great hall. The leader of the dance troupe, Aponsua, is known as a mestizo for his mixed blood, both Portuguese and native Sinhalese, and they are from the Rodiyas caste, a lower caste who had made their living by hunting and more recently by entertaining at parties. Aponsua has a fine selection of dancers, including his own daughter, Lovinia, who has recently joined the troupe and has shown herself to be a talented performer. Governor Maitland is seated at the head table, dressed in his red coat. As Lovinia strides in, she observes the handsomeness of his eyes, his proud gait and his tan skin, after many years spent in the South Asian sun. She takes her place at the center of the troupe, and then he notices her. The events are reconstructed in records as she dances before him, enticing him with her long flowing jet black tresses and fixing his attention with her large, expressive hazel brown eyes. King Tom was mesmerized. The very next day, Thomas has to set off on his 3-month familiarization visit around the island, but he cannot get the image of the young woman out of his mind. Her long brown limbs, her shining eyes, and the way she moved unself-consciously with the bearing of an aristocratic woman. Thomas quietly makes inquiries from his assistant and traveling companion about the dancers, attempting to disguise his romantic interest as a genuine curiosity of the local people. His assistant scowls as he describes the nature of the Rodiyas and their scavenging ways, but he is a man determined and already infatuated. Discovering that the dancers live just a few miles south of Colombo in a beachfront community known as Kuppayam, he learns about a little hamlet where he might be able to find Aponsua and his daughter, which he has just discovered is called Galkissa. Governor Thomas Maitland applies his usual vigor in getting the country back into shape. He complains bitterly in letters to the Colonial Secretary that his predecessor, Governor North, had been letting things slip. But like we said at the start, he is an unusual man. Having spent most of his adult life in the colonies, he believes that he has developed an empathy for natives and a pragmatic approach to winning them over. And he is not alone. Occasionally, Alexander Johnston, a Scotsman who holds the post of Advocate Fiscal, the equivalent of a modern-day Attorney General, joins him on his trips. Having grown up in South India, Alexander spoke Tamil and Telugu, and his interest in South Asian culture ran deep. Together, they fall into long discussions and find themselves to be kindred in spirit and mind. The efforts of the duo would be legendary in the recorded history of the island. After his tour, the new governor comes to the conclusion that he needs to get three things right. Firstly, roving gangs are terrorizing civilians, robbing and kidnapping women and children. So, law and order was his first priority. He installs a police department that is led by the local village chiefs and makes them responsible for maintaining the peace. His second priority is to get the administration's finances in order, and he does this by cutting down on unnecessary expenditure and getting more control over government spending. For example, the British government had taken several Dutch people on the island as prisoners of war. Under the terms of their capitulation, the British had to pay for their upkeep and even give them a pension. This was getting to be a burden. He rang up the Netherlands and requested that these prisoners of war be taken off the island and the state's payroll. Unlike his predecessor, he doesn't want to slog away at a pointless war in Kandy to consolidate power, so he ships off a number of troops to the subcontinent. Finally, he reforms the judicial department, reducing the number of courts, cutting down extra pay for judges, and clearing the court's backlogs. Maitland runs a tight ship of men. He is determined not to let government officials run rampant and become corrupt. Every government outpost had to prepare monthly accounts, and he kept his civil servants on their toes, threatening them with public trials back in England if they misbehaved. This was all well and good, but the British need Sri Lanka to become a rice bowl, fast, and orders from above sound more and more impatient. You have withdrawn troops and sent them to India. Well, now you have to produce enough food to feed them. Maitland is aware that he doesn't understand enough about the local system of agriculture and enlists Alexander Johnston to find out more. This is a dream come true for Johnston, who had up to now been confined to a stuffy office in Colombo. Johnston gathers information around the island with a ferocious intensity, visiting every single district and reporting on its state of agriculture. He even performs a census of each village, calculating how much land could be cultivated and understanding what could be grown and sold. In his travels around the country, he reports back regularly to the governor, his friend. He learns about the caste system of Ceylon and especially the many indigenous people of the island, including the Veddas, and lately, a fascinating group known as the Rodiyas. One night late in 1805, the two friends meet in Point de Galle, in the south of Ceylon, and as always they fall into a discussion under the stars about this little island they inhabit, the people and their customs. King Tom is well into his wine by now, and he is fading. As he drifts off, he catches on a word uttered by Johnston, Rodiya. The governor sits up alert and asks Johnston to repeat himself. He is then told a fascinating story. The Rodiyas' ancestors were thought to be from a hunting tribe in the east of India, Johnston explained. Legend has it that in the 3rd century BC, an archer from this tribe accompanies the retinue which transported a part of the sacred bo tree, under which the Buddha is said to have attained enlightenment, to Lanka. Their numbers grew, and they held fast to their hunting traditions, but they lived on the fringes of society. Roddy's belief in their lineage was fascinating. Johnston goes on to say, They were said to have worshipped the goddess Kali and were descendants of the goddess Ratnavali. The goddesses had extracted promises for sacrifices of the flesh, even occasionally human sacrifices, from their devotees. Johnston pauses to examine the governor's face, and seeing his confusion, he says, "Cannibals, Thomas. They were cannibals." Johnston becomes animated as he describes the Rodis' fall from grace. It all could have started with the local venison vendor, who served the court of Parakramabahu as told by the Rodi legend. The Rodi believed that one of their clansmen, a skilled archer who supplied the court of the king with venison, once ran short of meat and instead killed a young boy and sold the court his flesh. Nobility of the court, including Parakramabahu's own daughter, acquired such an appetite for the meat that the hunter could barely keep up with the demand. Young people all around Polonnaruwa began to disappear. Then one day, there's a gruesome discovery. A human finger is found in a dish served to a visitor, and then the story takes a turn. The Rodi always maintained that it was around this time in the 12th century that they lost all their status as skilled hunters and were relegated to a lifetime of ritual begging. But the women folk go even further. They believe that the king's own daughter, the princess, is involved in organizing the cannibalism. The king flings her out of the court and forces her to live with the Rodiya. It is said that ever since then, under Kandyan law, a common punishment for the noblemen who fell out of favor with the court was to consign their wives and daughters to a particular humiliation, being cast out of the court to live with the Rodi. This, it was thought, was a fate worse than death. The proud Rodi women have always believed that it is this royal and noble lineage imbued so deeply in their own blood that offers some explanation as to their beauty and noble bearing. The Rodi go on to suffer such marginalization that they are not permitted to even use common wells, and they will not be touched by the other classes. To identify them and their status, they are not allowed to cover their upper bodies, and aside from mendicancy, a fancy word for door-to-door begging, they earn their living by entertaining others or handling animal hides. The governor is listening with rapt attention, hanging on every one of Johnston's words. Johnston, after taking a thoughtful sip of wine, goes on to describe the beauty of the Rodi women. Large, soulful eyes, delicate features and full lips. Thomas doesn't need to hear any more. His mind is set on one thing. In March 1806, a letter addressed to the Colonial Secretary arrives in London. "Dear Sir, in my last letter to you, I stated my feelings about my personal accommodation in the point of houses. I gave to Mr. Twistleton, the sitting magistrate for his office, the house lately occupied by Mr. North, St. Sebastian's, and I have been able to provide for myself perfectly to my own comfort by building a small bungalow in the country, without any additional expense to His Majesty's government. It is from the Governor of Ceylon, Thomas Maitland, who informs the Colonial Secretary that because he found the accommodation so objectionable, he built his own residence. With a fine sense of economy that has been honed over years of colonial administration and enlisting men already on payroll, he builds his residence. He reports that the new residence came at no cost. In fact, he sold lands to fund the project, and that has produced a surplus to the state. The site is a strip of land just south of Colombo on a rocky outcrop, 100 feet above the sea, and is called Galkissa. The word is thought to have many meanings, but most likely refers to the boulders which make up an elevated cliff above the ocean. Maitland is comfortably installed in the bungalow where he wakes up each morning to a salty breeze and is treated to an intimate view of local life along the western coast of Ceylon as fisherfolk bring in their daily catch and as they bathe in the bright moonlight. That year, Lovinia and her dance troupe are frequent visitors to the governor's residence. It is said that they meet via a secret tunnel that is dug from the wine cellar all the way to the nearby water well used by the Rodi's Kuppayam. There are many mysteries surrounding Lovinia and Thomas. Were a 16-year-old Rodi girl and the 45-year-old governor embroiled in a passionate love affair? If so, was it consensual? Was Lovinia a heroine or a victim? Was the tunnel specially dug so Thomas could meet his young lover? All these are still avidly discussed in Sri Lanka, even today. What is not debated is that many civil servants who are a little worse off under the governor are very inclined to get rid of King Tom, their difficult and demanding boss, by spreading rumors of trysts with a local gypsy girl. These rumors are only made worse by what seems like a major effort to ensure the happiness and well-being of the natives at the expense of British officials. King Tom would be remembered for his reforms of the legal system and establishment of the Supreme Court. His respect for local customs was legendary, and his administration was considered one of the better times under the British. He even writes to the government collectors, "The sole object of government is and always ought to be to ensure the prosperity of the island solely through increasing the prosperity and happiness of the natives." Among his many reforms to bring better living standards, Governor Maitland was said to be instrumental in granting some relief to the Rodiyas, allowing them to cover their upper bodies. In any case, Governor Maitland served in Ceylon for 6 years and was then appointed Governor of Malta in 1811 due to reasons of ill health. After he left Ceylon, his successor found some problems. Most of the land used for the residence did not belong to the government at all. Maitland had simply built on it, exciting the notion that in his haste to be near his lover, Thomas just went ahead and planted his flag. Thomas Maitland's close confidant, Sir Alexander Johnston, who was knighted in 1811, went on to serve as Chief Justice of Ceylon. Under him, more natives were included in government positions, and the legal system was enriched with the customs of the Buddhists, Hindus, and Muslims on the island. And he abolished slavery. Johnston was a dedicated student of history and lineage, and one of his letters, written in 1827 to the Royal Asiatic Society, which he founded, is still a treasured record of the ancient origins of the Ceylonese Moors and the fascinating role they played in the development of the island. But one of his finest services was that which he rendered to the translation and dissemination of the Mahavamsa, the great chronicle, Sri Lanka's historical epic, in an effort to assimilate the British to Ceylon's traditions and beliefs. And what became of Lovinia? We will never truly know how her story ends. Some say she threw herself into the ocean when her lover left. Some say that Lovinia even had a child by Thomas. Others still say that Thomas wrote over a large property to her in the south of Colombo. Writers have long speculated that Lovinia was in fact in love with a Rodi boy, but she was forced to submit to the advances of the powerful Englishman. The mystery goes on. But we do know that from the veranda of the Mount Lavinia Hotel, as the governor's residence is now known, on a clear night as the waves crash against the rocks, if we listen carefully, it is said that you can still hear the song of the Rodi women. This had been the story of Lovinia Aponsua and Thomas Maitland, the forbidden lovers of Galkissa. Thank you for watching, and a special thanks to our Patreon members for their continued support. Make sure to like, subscribe and hit that bell button to get notified of new episodes.